All right, thank you all for clicking on this video. This is another composer interview, a part of this series of 2020 Bamboo, preparing for my CD of a bunch of new commissions for Shakuhachi. And I'm sitting here with professor, radio recording host for Not Your Grandmother's Radio Station, pianist, composer extraordinaire, probably an author too that I don't know about, Eric Charnofsky. So thank you so much for being here via Zoom recordings.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So you were one of the first composers that I commissioned on this series, and we were very lucky to have Omamuki Foundation fund this for us and help us out with it. Tell me a little bit about the experience of working with Shakuhachi. And when I emailed, as I remember when I emailed and I said, "Hey, Professor Charnofsky, do you want to write me a piece of music?" What went through your mind?
Well, a lot of things. I mean, first, I love receiving commissions, and I like opportunities to write new stuff. So that sounded great. I guess my first reaction was, I know you're a shakuhachi player, but you're a composer, you're a violist. What do you want me to write for? Mm-hmm. I had no experience writing for shakuhachi. I have appreciated it for a long time. And I have a lot of experience writing for and playing piano with flutists. So there's obviously a similarity, but I was a little apprehensive not having written for the instrument before and knowing almost nothing about it from the standpoint of a composer. So I was a little apprehensive at first, but once I watched some of your instructional videos and got a better feel for what it would involve, I think I took it on very enthusiastically. As you might remember, it was a very limited time constraint, not just for this piece, but I was working on another big commission at the same time, and it was a busy time of year. So I knew I had to be pretty expedient about it. But overall, it was a great experience for me. I learned a lot about just the nature of the instrument from writing for it. And I wrote for somebody who's enthusiastic about commissioning new pieces. That's always a huge motivator.
Yeah, and then I've had multiple times to perform it. I've played it in Japan 3 times. I've played it in America, I think 2 or 3 times as well, and I've already recorded it in studio, and you have that recording, so I hope that's to your liking. And now I've also heard that you have performed and recorded this piece on alto flute. And so let's talk a little bit about the how it's different, and does it work for alto flute and all those things?
Yeah, so my thought was, I knew that you were performing it here and abroad, and I wanted to get performances of it here in Cleveland. I don't know any shakuhachi players here. I'm sure there are some, but I work very frequently with a flutist named George Pope, and he and I have recorded a CD, and we have performed now for many years together. And he's always enthusiastically played new music by composers he knows. In fact, our CD is simply that, including a piece of mine. And he loves supporting composers and new music. So I thought, I bet this piece would work transcribed for flute, but I think the alto flute has a more similar timbre to the shakuhachi. And George likes to play alto flute. He's performed a number of works on that instrument. So he did most of the transcribing. I gave him the score. I gave him your recording. And I said, don't try to exactly imitate the shakuhachi. If I wanted that exact sound, I'd hire a shakuhachi player. I said, but make this piece work for alto flute, in which you are kind of depicting the nature of the music as a shakuhachi player would play it, but on a different instrument. So he made a lot of adaptations. Of course, the instruments are different, but the timbre has some similarity. And I have now taken on the project of making another version of it for alto flute, just so that the notation is more conducive to an alto flute player. So there really are now 2 different versions of the piece.
Oh, that's really cool. So the piece name is Echo, and I don't remember which Chinese characters you chose, but can you talk a little bit about the title and what you were thinking about that?
Yeah, so I don't think of echo so much as a reverberation. I didn't want to get that effect, but rather the nature of the piece is where the melody is presented in a certain number of notes, and then I fragment that melody and play a certain number of notes from the end of that as a fragment at a softer dynamic. So to me, it's as though the first iteration, say 8 notes, is the statement, and then its echo is maybe the last 5 notes or the last 3 notes at a softer dynamic. So it has an effect of call and response a little bit, but also of an echo. And that title made sense to me to use for that reason.
One of the things that I was really impressed about your piece when performing it, and because I got to perform it so many times, I started picking up things of really solid fundamental compositional technique. Just flipping things backwards and fragmenting them, taking the long notes and making them short, making things upside down, and using fragmentations and then shifting around the melody. And I realized that the piece is actually not a lot of material, but you've stretched it out and made it feel like it's a lot more than just a couple ideas. It was very impressive.
Well, thank you. That's what I try to work with in any composition. And of course, writing for a single instrument is limiting in a good way, I think. I can't have any counterpoint. With two or more instruments playing off each other, the harmony is only implicit in the linear sense.
Sure.
But it's good to have that type of restriction because it forces me to think in a different way. And so, yeah, presenting basic material is fine, but what you do with that material makes the piece interesting or not. And so, yeah, I agree. Elongating certain notes, flipping things upwards, inverting things, changing the rhythms. For me, it's sort of like writing a theme and variations in that way. And it's a discipline that I worked hard on, but I'm glad it came off. I'm glad you enjoyed playing it.
I might have to commission you another piece because I can sing and play at the same time, so you can get that counterpoint in there. So
there you go. That is always an option, even with flute players and shakuhachi players. Yeah.
So how did you get into music overall? What was your first experience that made you wanted to start playing music, or made you think, okay, I think I want to do this for the rest of my life?
Music has been a way I define who I am from the absolute very beginning. I mean, even this may sound strange to you, but even before I was born, my mother was taking guitar lessons while she was pregnant with me, and she said I would kick in rhythm against her abdomen. So my grandparents had been musicians. I think the music gene was passed along to me. As a small kid, I was constantly singing and inventing my own music. And even though I didn't know how to play the piano well yet, I would go to a piano and make up tunes. And so music was just part of my essence from the absolute beginning. It made sense for me to start studying as a small child. I took violin lessons and then piano much more seriously growing up. And composing was just a component of that all along. I never thought of it as being independent from being a performer. So when somebody said, well, you should write down what you compose, and they introduced me to a composition teacher in junior high who I studied with for 5 years privately, it was just a natural fit. So I've never questioned my musical interest or ability. It's just always been a part of my essence. And it just made sense to continue with it in college and professionally.
So you graduated from the Juilliard School with a master's in piano and composition, and then you went on.
Just to clarify, yeah, my bachelor's degree were in piano and composition from a university in California. My master's from Juilliard was in collaborative piano.
Okay,
and that's it.
And then you didn't do your doctorate?
No, correct.
Okay. So then what led you to professorship? Usually most people want to get their doctorate and then they go into the professorship. I had just assumed.
Yeah, and that's the traditional path now, and certainly it's almost impossible to get a solid position without a doctorate. There's very few people who have them, so I'm fortunate. Teaching was also something I gravitated toward kind of naturally. Both my parents were teachers, a lot of members of my family, so I think there's just a knack for it and a model growing up. Not in music specifically, in my relatives' experience, but I had that model. And I did some teaching in college and had a teaching fellowship at Juilliard, and I seemed to enjoy it, and it seemed to be something I could do well, and just kept up with it and was able to form positions here in Cleveland, Ohio, and went from there. If you would ask me 25 years ago what will I be doing? And somebody would say, well, you're going to be teaching music history and you're going to be teaching, music seminars and various things in Cleveland, Ohio at Case Western Reserve University without a doctorate, I would have said that's impossible. But that's just where things led. Teaching is, I feel it's just one component of what I do. Performing is a primary component. Composing is in the mix as well. So I've made a career out of different aptitudes and different interests, and I've been fortunate to have these opportunities.
Mm-hmm. I think many people will, well, one, if they knew everything that you did, they'd be, I think, wondering, does this guy have 36 hours in the day, and where is he finding those 12 hours? You teach multiple courses at the Case Western, not only music theory, music history, the Sage's writing courses, along with other things, running your own radio program, and somehow finding time to perform extensively. You're a member of the Composers Guild in Cleveland, sitting on the board, and a whole slew of other things. How do you manage and find all the time to balance these things out and take care of your beautiful cats?
It's tricky. You know, there are not enough hours of the day. You have to allocate what you're going to do when. Most of my composing takes place during breaks, summertime, Christmas break, that kind of time that I designate for it, because during the regular week, it's just impossible. But yeah, I'm constantly trying to squeeze out time here and there to do everything. I probably don't practice as many hours as your typical concert pianist. I'm not at the piano for 8 hours a day. There's just not enough time to do that. But I've found a way to make it work. You know, I'm doing things I've done many times before, so there's less preparation. I can do things more readily, and I'm pretty quick about learning music. So it works, but there are often times I say, oh, I just wish I didn't have to do this month, or could drop that, because it does get overwhelming. That's just, but I've always been quick to pick things up, and if there are things that I enjoy doing, it makes it fun, worthwhile.
Yeah. One of the things that I remember from being in your classes as a student is I don't think anybody ever complained about your class, and most people really enjoyed being there. I remember the first day that you played piano for us, and it was just a little Scriabin bit, and we all looked at each other and goes, oh my God, we have a teacher that can play piano. For those who are non-musicians, a lot of times what happens is we go into a class, and the teacher might be a skilled cellist or violinist, but they have to give examples on the piano, and then when they play piano, we go, well, I wish we just had the recording, but definitely not the case. And everybody really enjoyed the class, and they enjoyed the way that you give your lectures. Now, you've had to have given these lectures now 50 to 100 times. How do you keep that enthusiasm and spontaneity throughout every single time?
That's a very good question, and I've been asked that before. For me, the primary motivation is not the material itself. It's not, doing with that material, I don't know, exploring new avenues. I mean, that's all great, learning from what I do. The primary motivation is who's in the room, who's in the classroom. And if they're new students I've not worked with before, I want to get to know who they are, what their experience is already, what they know from before, what they hope to learn from going forward. That's my motivator. So yes, I have given certain lectures numbers of times, or worked with the same material over and over. But every time I work with a class, it's a group of new students, and that truly motivates me, truly inspires me to be the best teacher I can. I think a lot of people would probably give a similar answer. I do enjoy learning from my students. I do enjoy the material that I present, and when it gets stale, I'll request a different class configuration, different schedule. But for me, the motivator is who is in the room and how I can present material as though it's for the first time, because it is for those students. I have to always keep that in the forefront of my mind.
Before we move on to the next topic, I want to add you have that radio show on Monday. Do you want to say a little bit about it and where people can listen?
Yeah, it's called Not Your Grandmother's Classical Music. I've done it for about 6.5 years. It is on the campus station at Case Western Reserve University. It's called WRUW. FM. Now, most of people who are viewing this will probably not be from Cleveland, but you can actually live stream the show on the WRUW website, .org. And it airs live Mondays from 2 to 4. Not the most convenient time for everybody to listen. But it is a program of classical music that I select. It's 2 hours long, and it's music that I research and provide background commentary for before each selection. And it's a variety of things, but what I definitely don't do is play mainstream, typical, standard classical music. I try to find things that are unusual, pieces that are obscure, pieces that have been forgotten, interesting transcriptions, contemporary music, music by composers I know. So it's always a new mix of things. I never repeat anything. For example, just yesterday, day before we're recording this, on Monday, I played, it was the birthdays of Rachmaninoff and Scriabin. And they've written, or not Scriabin, sorry, Rachmaninoff and Busoni. And they've written pieces that everybody knows, but I found some obscure transcriptions that they both made, and it made it fun and interesting. It was also April Fool's Day, so I played some PDQ Bach.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So what is next for you in terms of the composition? Do you have new commissions that are coming up, new pieces that we can be expecting to hear soon?
Well, in about 2 weeks, I have a brand new choral piece being performed live by the Case Concert Choir. It's a piece called Spring. And their director actually asked me to compose it for them. So we had another rehearsal just last night. We're rehearsing next week and performing that. Actually, it's just in about a week and a half from now. So that's on the immediate front. I don't have any commissions immediately coming up, but I've got a couple of projects I'm interested in working on this summer when I have more time. Probably a piece for soprano and cello, maybe even a brass quintet. I'm looking at opportunities to send pieces off for contests or performance opportunities, and also things that I haven't done before. So that's my plan for now.
Has there ever been something that you've wanted to do and but the opportunity hasn't presented itself yet?
I've never written an orchestra piece.
Really?
Yeah, I never have. And I know that you have. Certainly a lot of student composers have done that. When you attend a school like CIM, which you did, you have this wonderful ensemble available to you. And it's just something I haven't done yet. I don't want to write an orchestra piece unless I know I have a performance, because the amount of time commitment involved would be so overwhelming.
Yeah, my 9-minute piece took me 6 months to write. So.
I'm not surprised. And that's just 9 minutes. Imagine if it was a full-length symphony or something. So I've been asked in the past to write a wind ensemble piece, which is probably a similar type of project and discipline. And that may happen at some point, because I have a wind ensemble director who would be interested in premiering a piece of mine. So those are larger projects I'd like to do, but pretty much everything else as a composer, I think that I've wanted to write, I've done. I've never written an opera. Most people have not, but that would be another just massive project that if somebody really wanted to do that, I'd have to get people to collaborate with and librettist and so forth. But that would be
and probably take a sabbatical too.
yeah, or maybe wait till I retire and then do it. So.
For sure. Well, I see that your cat is now taking you away from us. Thank you so much for cutting out the time to come and talk with me and finally get this done. I wish I could be there in person to do this like with everybody else, but life is life, and we're all very busy.
I'm glad we have this technology to enable it, and thank you so much. Thank you for not only having this opportunity to interview, but also for commissioning the piece and performing it so beautifully.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And everybody stay tuned for the next composer interview. And of course, all of the pieces, I have Eric's piece and already performed and up, so I'll have that in the link in the description. All right. Thank you so much, Eric. And I'll see everybody soon.
Thank you.